at this point, I will never not have a bookkeeper. Like, I think it's one of the most valuable services that I pay for. Just having someone even just run reports, show me comparisons, and keep me connected to the numbers in a whole new way. It's really fantastic. But I think it really just, for me, it all came down to understanding what more was possible if I could break out beyond the spreadsheet.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a great one. Our guest is the owner and chief alchemist at Alchemy and Aim, a website development and business strategy agency that helps thought leaders and entrepreneurs craft custom websites to enhance client experience. Brandi Bernoskie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, it's great to have you, and I'm excited about talking about client attraction, and by the sounds of things, you've done a lot of that. But before we get into all of that, please tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce us to you.
Absolutely. So I have had my company for the last 7.5 years, I think. My background's a little eclectic. I was actually I majored in theater first. I had a theater major, physics minor, math minor, then ended up in school again for physics, philosophy, and religion, and ended up in grad school for philosophy of physics and science studies. So not exactly the path that you would expect to lead to a job building websites. But I got very into blogging in the, what I call the early days of blogging, when there were still RSS feeds and Google Reader and things like that. And really kind of started playing around and just paid attention to how things were done in the world. And I had a lot of friends kind of just start asking me for support and help. And I found my philosophy of building websites was very different from some other developers out there, which has really allowed me to grow and attract really amazing clients doing incredible things in the world. And it really is just such an incredible privilege to be part of what they're creating and help amplify what they're doing.
Absolutely. And such an interesting background. So it started in theater. So what of all those topics you mentioned, because it is eclectic. It's there's a lot there. What were you most passionate about?
To this day, I still have this very kind of soft spot and I just love for, science, but science in like the human realm is what I want to call it. And it's kind of like it bleeds into my work today of like technology in the human realm. There is, science is incredible. And like looking at things like dark matter and string theory and quantum mechanics, like it is a fascinating world. But we have to understand the impact it has on a larger level. And I think it's wonderful to bring the wonder of science to the public as well. It shouldn't be just like locked away in a lab or anything like that. I'm like, these are really, really fascinating concepts. But I mean, it was one of the reasons I loved studying science studies, which is it's this intersection of philosophy, history, sociology, and communications of science, so that you're really looking at science holistically, not just like the ideas that come in, but like how do people interact with how do scientists interact with each other? Because it's not just a contained system where all, pure science happens. Like there are human beings doing science. So, and I think it's the same way here. It's like we're human beings using technology. So we need to have some thought and care around that.
Absolutely. And I love that you also have the art side of things. You've got passion for the science, but you've got you bring the art from the theater and that perspective. And so often we hear this concept of both the art and science. And so when you bring those two together, powerful things can happen. It sounds like that's been a bit of your life.
Yes. Yeah, it absolutely has. And, to this day, I still, there's so much that was so valuable in my theater training, just simply of understanding other people. Like, some people think that theater training is all about like learning to pretend. I mean, it could be, but really a lot of my training was like learning to really deeply understand human beings and like what motivates someone, like, what drives them. And that's still to this day, like every time I'm on a call with a client, I'm thinking through and I'm talking through with them what motivates them. Like, what are we building and why? Because that determines what we build.
It's a remarkable insight. I don't know that we've ever talked about it. I don't know that I've ever thought about it. But knowing a bit about acting and theater and myself, and just that intersection of business and marketing. I mean, if you think about an actor preparing for a role, they would do an incredible dive into who the person is, their motivations, who they truly are.
Yes.
And if you were going to market to people, you'd really have to do the same thing. And many don't. Do that. They get into business and they just go and attack the world through their own view of the world versus the view of their customer, which is the big problem. Because you're doing things on behalf of yourself versus doing things on behalf of your customer, who is the role you're trying to play, really, if you're the actor in your business. So it's pretty cool that you have that background and bring that to your clients. I'm sure that's probably a source of your success in your business.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely one of the things. I think it's also a source of my success is having a really fantastic team that I get to work with and brainstorm with. It really makes, I think especially when it comes to technology and problem solving, having other brains, especially other brilliant brains to bounce ideas off of, work things through with, really helps us just be even more creative together.
I love it. So now, in terms of your business, it's been 7 years into it. What have been some of the roadblocks that you have faced personally in growing your business?
So there's a lot of mental roadblocks. And I will tell you, what's funny is I used to be really, really good, like with managing, like my accounts and money and things like that. And I had to get good at that in a whole new way as a business owner. It's one thing when you're doing it personally. It is another just beast, to have it in your business and understand how money's coming in, when it's flowing in, even being able to understand on a year-to-year basis that there are certain trends we see. There are trends in election years that we don't see in non-election years. So that's really been like a really interesting dive. Is just kind of, it's funny. I say like, I'm a math major. I'm minored in math twice. Like I love math. And I've done some really complex math, but digging into finances of a business and really understanding them, I would take quantum mechanics any day over it. I mean, there's a lot of nuance and elements that need to go into it. So I think, that's been one of, finding that place of like, when is it right to hire? Like, when are you growing so much that you have to hire, especially in a service-based business? It's a little different if you're making widgets that, you've made once and you can just reproduce. But, in my business, like we build custom websites. So in order to build more custom websites, I potentially have to take on another team member. So really being able to know when the right time for that is.
And has that always been, so that's something that's a challenge for you? Did you have a bookkeeper? How did that journey go? Now we're kind of off topic of what we're going to be talking about, but I think for our listener right now is probably going, oh, interesting. This is your potential, our listener is potential customer, and some of the things that you've already said these are the challenges that you're faced with and sharing with us, which is always such an interesting insight and perspective. But how did that go for you?
So I would say like my first year in business, I did taxes myself. It was pretty, I will say when you're a solopreneur, the numbers are fairly easy. It wasn't until I hired my first like team member, and it wasn't even like an employee. I think I had someone like part-time for like 15 hours a week. That's when I knew I needed someone and I needed help. And I was very fortunate in that I was in a really fantastic mastermind group, and one of the women in the group happened to be a bookkeeper, and she and I had multiple conversations around my business, and she just helped me understand like the need for a bookkeeper, and that I couldn't keep everything in an Excel spreadsheet forever, because there was going to be like, it was clear that as my business was starting to grow, there was growing complexity in the business and in numbers, and she just helped me see really what was possible. I think so often as we work with entrepreneurs, there are so many factors in running a business that you just kind of have to sometimes help them see what's possible for their business and whatever it is that you do, whatever way you serve them. So, she and I worked together for a number of years before she shifted her business. And I will say at this point, I will never not have a bookkeeper. Like, I think it's one of the most valuable services that I pay for. Just having someone even just run reports, show me comparisons, and keep me connected to the numbers in a whole new way. It's really fantastic. But I think it just, for me, it all came down to understanding what more was possible if I could break out beyond the spreadsheet.
I love it. Well, I'm blushing on behalf of our listener right now, and they definitely I would imagine, love hearing that. The essential. The fact that they're essential and bookkeepers essential inside of your business. And, it's just a great perspective of that entry point, right? It was, you had no clue really when you were starting. You didn't go to school. They don't bring out like the bookkeeper course and say, this is what you're going to need for growing your business. It's not discussed. It's not known. And you fortunately came across someone who could help you, could educate you. And that was the entry point. It was education. And so that's such a great way to grow. Talk about attracting customers, the way your bookkeeper initially was in a mastermind with you. It's like, find people that are interested. You're in a mastermind. You're trying to grow your business. You're passionate. You're ambitious, right? It's like, go help those people figure out the benefits of having understanding and knowledge around finances and how to make it better. So, and then that leads to helping them grow and being a part of that journey. So thank you for sharing that. It's a great perspective.
Of course.
So back to you and what you do for your clients is you help them build websites. Now, before the show started, we were chatting a little bit about what's your passion really around your business. And I really liked your take on technology and how it's not just let's go do a whole bunch of stuff. Let's be thoughtful and actually do the right things. Let's share a little bit of that with our listener.
Absolutely. So I think it's all about intentionality. And one of the things that I do with any of my clients, whether they're new or ongoing clients, is we really seek to understand how any change to their website, any new addition, new functionality is going to fit into the bigger picture of not just their business, but their lives too. So when I first started my business, I was doing a lot of work with bloggers because I too was a blogger, and that was the world I was emerging from. So at that time, it was kind of customary that when you started a blog, you would have social media. Like you'd have every social media. You'd have like Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and Google Plus, and like you would do it all. But what I realized very quickly is that trying to do it all was really unsustainable. Like a lot of the bloggers that I was working with at the time, like they were parents, they had children. You can't be on 16 different social media networks and balance family life well. So, I mean, maybe there are some people who can out there. They are probably asking for help with it. But when my approach always to anything that I'm working on with clients, any website we're building, is making sure that it fits into the bigger perspective of like what they want success to look like for themselves, and not just for their business. Because there is, the success of growing a business and reaching 6 figures and 7 figures and so on. But there is like, what do you want your life to look like? Who do you want to serve? What gets you out of bed every day? And how can we attract those people, build the systems into your website that make your life easier so that you are more in your zone of genius and less in like the back and forth scheduling for a call. So I think it really does come down to like intentionality and just being aware of what you really want and making sure that you're working with partners who are helping you make choices that get you there.
I can see where the name of your company comes from, Alchemy and Aim. Just listening to you, it's really, you're helping people really design their future. Yeah. It's not about a website. What I'm getting is, it's design your future in your mind, start to craft that. What is it that you really want it to look like? And then build the tools to make that happen versus something else. And I think for the most part, most people do it complete opposite, which is just, let's put a bunch of stuff out there and see what shows up. And then you get what you get. And usually it's not that great.
Yeah, it's very easy to kind of get lost in like magic pills and like, ideal funnels that are supposed to always work. And I think you just need to be intentional about what you're building in your business. Like I very much made a choice that I was never going to run Facebook ads for my business. And I don't. That's not how I find my clients. I find my clients through referrals. They sometimes find me at bottoms of websites that we've built. And I like the connections I make because of the referrals, the networking I do, the podcasts I do. I'm just getting more of like my ideal client through those channels. So it's easy to kind of see what other people are doing and think that's the solution. But I think you really need to know yourself and know what you want to build in order to make the right choices.
I agree with you completely. And it would often be a much longer path to success if you tried to do it the opposite way. If you really figure out who you are and what you want and who you're serving and have that crystal clear, you can just go build that. And you can build the tools to get there. And it's like, 2 steps or 3 steps instead of 50 steps, because you're going to attract people. Your messaging is going to be right on. You're going to attract the people that you want to work with that brighten your day. And life is so much better when you really know who you're serving. And so that I really agree. And I can't stress that enough for our listeners, is spending that time. It can often be very difficult to spend the time and the exercise of figuring that stuff out. It's not like it's just, here it is, it's easy work. I mean, it could be easy, but likely it's going to be challenging because there's so many things. It's about discriminating of possible routes. You're going to work with this person or that person, this industry, to try and make those decisions of discrimination are difficult. And I use discrimination. People are like, "Oh, Michael's discriminating." I'm like, you're discriminating ideas here, so it's okay to do that. And so I'd love to hear some stories of where you've kind of brought people through that challenging time, which is they don't know who they're dealing with, and you've got to make big decisions and say yes to things and no to things. What's that been like for some of your customers?
Yeah, I will say this. I don't think there's anything wrong with experimenting early on in your business and taking on some different types of clients, because you may not perfectly know who your ideal client is until you start working with some people. And that's actually very often I've had people come to me and they're like, I'm just starting my business. I need a website. And I'll ask them, what their client base is like. And they'll say like, oh, I haven't worked with anyone. This is not the time to build a website. This is the time to get like 3 clients and start working with them, because just that experience alone will help you start to formulate, more of like what works for you, what doesn't, what industries you're interested in or not. And then when it comes to actually like, you've worked with a few clients, you know who you kind of have a sense of who your ideal is. I spend a lot of time with clients, not every client, because some do come actually very self-aware of this already, but spending time with them, figuring out how to talk to their clients on their website. So this is something that has been exceedingly common in the past, is to build a hero site. Hi, my name is Brandi, and I can build you an amazing website, and I will save you from your technology woes. Who am I talking to in that case? Like, you don't really know. So it becomes much more interesting when I start to reorient the website language towards my ideal customers. Like, are you ready to make big changes in the world, but don't feel like you've got the right technological foundation in order to do that? It's like, it's so critical that you speak to your ideal clients and you speak their language. It's not always that, there's the problem I solve, which is websites. But then there's the problem I really solve, which is, clarity and confidence and so many of those kind of almost non-tangible factors. I can't start with the problem I really solve, because my ideal clients aren't always they're not using that language for themselves. They're saying, I don't have a website that feels aligned with me. Like, something's off. I'm not proud to show it. So it's really, I think, really kind of getting clear on who are you talking to, and thinking about what are the problems that they're having? Like, how are they articulating it? How do they feel about it? What's the biggest emotional block that they're encountering? And then how do you guide them from where they are to what is possible for them? Like, how do you've worked with people, what success looks like. How can you start to construct that in the language of the website? So that's something we've done with a lot of clients, is just kind of like getting them to start articulating what their ideal clients are going through, so that we can get that on the website, so that when someone arrives on your site, they're going, oh my gosh, this person understands me. They know me. They're inside my head. This is amazing. They have the solution.
It's amazing what you're saying and you break it down in a real simple way, which is, just that fact of, even for our listener right now listening, it's like what they often will think about is, oh, I must need a website. But but really, you're helping them actually get clear about who their client's going to be. You're going to figure out messaging, all these different things that they wouldn't even know they needed to do, because they don't know that that's the problem. It's what they want is a website that attracts customers, but what they need is better messaging, better clarity, and all those good things. Same for our listener and their customer. It's like, well, what's the related point of what is it that your client wants, but what is it that they really need? If you try and sell them what they really need, it's often going to be confusing for them and probably repulsive, right? Because often what they need is not going to be fun. It's going to be challenging and all that good stuff. Like, but you have to, right?
Show them that progress to getting, to showing them that success, that deeper success. Because it's just, it's when you're in pain, like, you want something that stops the pain. You don't realize that you can have so much, better health and wellness beyond the pain too.
Exactly. So now talk about that in terms of how we have listeners, I'm sure, right now that are sitting there thinking, well, I do think I need a new website. They're going to be at various stages. But if they were considering that a website might, or a new website, or a refreshed website, or a rebranding, or whatever it is that they might be thinking about, what's the first thing that they should not do and do? Like, make sure you don't do this and instead do that. What would that be?
The biggest thing is, don't just hire the neighborhood kid who happens to know some stuff about websites. Like, don't do that. Please don't. It's sometimes the first step for many people. I think if you have a website, the first step shouldn't even be rebrand it, rebuild it. Just look at the messaging. Look how you're talking to people. Sometimes the best first step is actually changing copy. It's sometimes I'm like always shocked that I say that because I'm kind of writing myself out of work, but it's true. Like sometimes the best first step is not building a new website or getting all fancy with the functionality. It's just, do you have a clear call to action? And are you really speaking to your people? That's it. Like that's core. So if you don't have a website, I think you still need to take the same approach as like, what if as soon before you start building a website, what's the one thing you want people to do on your website? Probably going to be contact you, especially if you're a bookkeeper and you're looking for new clients. But how are you talking to them? Because that is going to serve as the foundation. Fancy design, awesome functionality, all can come later.
So, that in itself, the one thing, well, you said a couple of things, but the first one, don't hire anybody, just anybody off the street that, I can build you a website. That's the equivalent of, look, I can walk out today to somebody on the street and say, can you come in and do my bookkeeping here? And they could. Mm-hmm. They could say, yeah, I could do that, but they're going to do it really badly, and it's going to cost me a fortune, right? That low cost, a cheap way of doing it is going to cost me a fortune, maybe even catastrophic fortune of losing my business because it hasn't been done right? So that's the equivalent there. So always, for something as serious as this, and it is serious about attracting people into your business, take it seriously and hire somebody who can help you. And then you said, look, there could be just one or two things to change about the existing website. So don't go and think you got to throw everything out and restart. It might be just a few simple things. Now, those eyeballs that would be able to see that and say, oh, you could change this and this, that's a skill. How is that something you do, or what would you recommend for people to just say, look, just give me a bit of an audit here. What are the three things I could do to just tweak and augment what we've got here to make some better results?
Yeah. So I certainly do audits like that with kind of new clients. Even just on the first call, I usually can spot some things on the sites that need to change. My approach is always a very holistic approach. So I'm looking at not just copy, but also functionality, also like design appeal. But a couple years ago, I got certified as a story brand guide, and Don Miller created this framework called Story Brand. There are other story brand guides out there. They would be able to look at your site from a copy perspective and be able to say, hey, you're not speaking to your ideal clients, or there are way too many like choices for people to make. Like, I've encountered people's websites that have like 17 menu items. How do you choose? Like what's the next thing you do? You really want there to be a clear call to action. So any story brand guide can look at kind of some basic things like that. I certainly specialize in more of that holistic picture of just like, I'm going to look at the copy and see if the copy actually talks to people. But I'm also going to be looking for other things as well.
Love it. Big fan myself of Donald Miller, and we've discussed Donald Miller on the show a lot over the years. And so another great resource, and certainly an awesome service that I'm sure you provide with that. So that for many could be a first step, is looking at, getting an audit and saying, well, this is, the minimal viable thing you could do to have some improvement. And then this is the bigger picture. This is where you could go, and I think for our listener, depending on the stage of their business, you're just starting out, you just got started, or perhaps you have, you're doing some work out, some clients, you're growing, or maybe you're full up and, you can't take on any more clients. Well, at each stage, it's going to be a different approach. And I'm sure with your recommendations as to what would be effective. Maybe it's gotten, the website's not important right now, but having somebody help you, guide you through what you should do and where you can go in the future is certainly valuable.
Absolutely.
So in terms of getting to know you and finding out more, you mentioned you do an audit and you have services that you help potentially our listener get through these hurdles and take on these strategies in their business. What would be the best first step for our listener if they wanted to learn more about you?
Really the best first step is to head to our website, alchemyandaim.com. If you go to the contact page and fill out the form, that comes to me, and I'm really happy to have a chat with anyone. Just make sure you're set in the right direction. Sometimes I'm not the best fit. Occasionally, like, people will come and they need more design work. And I know a lot of designers. I'm happy to pair the people who come to me with whatever is going to be the next best step for them. That's really what, like, we're all about, is making sure that you're taking the next best step. Sometimes it's design first. Sometimes it's, like I said, I've talked to people and I've been like, just get up a simple Squarespace site. Like, if you haven't booked many clients yet, a Squarespace site just it'll make you feel a little more official. It'll make the clients that you're approaching know that you're taking yourself seriously. It does not need to be hyper complex. So I'm really just happy to point people in the right direction, or, guide them on the path with us, if that makes most sense.
That's fantastic. Well, this has been a really refreshing conversation about, we started off talking about websites, and we actually didn't talk much about websites, because it's really not about the website. It's about, making sure you know who your customer is, make sure you have the messaging right, and then you can start putting tools and strategies in place in your business. And Brandi, by the sounds of things, you are a guide that can help our customer win the day, our listener win the day with their business. And that's a little quote from Donald Miller in terms of helping your customers win the day. Brandi, thank you so much for joining us. And on behalf of our listeners, thanks for your generosity in sharing with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was just a wonderful conversation, and I'm just so glad to connect with the whole audience.
Pleasure is all ours. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.